All right, so we are Dashalytics. I'm Joe. This is Kyle. Then we have Nate, and finally Alex. So before we get started, we're going to outline what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing will be the project overview. We're going to go into our problem, then our solution, followed by the progress of our current project. Then we're going to dive into a video demo, and then we're going to go with our design choices and architecture, followed by the reflection and future of the project. So to start things off, we're going to talk about our sponsors, one of our sponsors, 4D Technologies. So they have designed a Space Genius robot that is what is called a Space Genius robot, and it would go up and down grocery store aisles and can scan an entire store in less than an hour. And the idea was that it would scan all price tags and UPC barcodes as shown on the video displayed, and it would check for anything that's not in stock or maybe a price tag is wrong or something like that, and then it would upload it to its own private cloud server. So then they had us come in. And basically the problem was that, yes, it would go to the private cloud server, and they also have an API that can connect to that data. But the client, AKA like a store manager or something like that, has no way to access that data, no application to use it. So our solution was, we're going to build an easy-to-use dashboard that basically congregates the data that's in the cloud and would put it into relevant widgets or tables or anything like that so the store can view it and then come up with any ways to fix that issue. The nice thing is that our dashboard is customizable. So let's say like they want to do an aisle to aisle or item to item style of their dashboard. They can do that and then fix that issue. So let's say a price tag is wrong, but it keeps coming up as wrong every single day, even though it is the right price and they've checked it. Then they know if something's wrong, might be wrong in the system. They can come up with something like an operational decision and say, all right, we need to change that issue. Or maybe an aisle has a lot of issues. They can go into that aisle and see what's going on there. So it really helps them out overall. In terms of our current progress of the project, so the thing is that right now they are working on an API, like a real API, that can connect to their data. So right now they've only provided us with the test data. So they said that will be finalized by like the end of this semester. So like if we started, let's say the project this semester and went on to the next semester, it would actually like be a final product with all the right data. But so right now we're just using test data. So with what we got, this is what we have for each section. So the data is basically split up into 8 sections. The first section being prices. So the robot will scan the price tags, and then the data that is in there would be like a price discrepancy or something like that. And this page is pretty laid out. The data they gave us is pretty flushed. We have good widgets, we have good tables inside that page, and you'll see it in our demo. The following page is a planogram. They did not offer us with an actual floor plan, but we know kind of how we want the page to display. So we designed our own floor plan, and you'll see that as well in the demo and how we laid that out. And the next one is stock. This is divided more into 3 categories. So let's say there's like a low stock on the shelf, a no stock on the shelf, or maybe even a full stock. That is basically split up into those 3 sections there, and that was also provided with a lot of data, so we had a pretty good basis of that. Now when it came to promotions, product, and category, the test data did not have enough for that, or was missing some stuff. So like for example, the promotions page, there's 2 types of promotion alerts. There's the missing promotions and then the expired promotions. But the problem is that the expired promotions API was not even working, so we have like half the data for that. So we couldn't really come up with appropriate widgets or anything like that to put on that page. When it came to products and category, we didn't have enough test data to work with. Like there's only about 50 products total in the test data, so we could not meet that full capability. And then with categories, there just wasn't enough because there's only 50 products as well. And that would then lead into predictive analytics, because the idea was that the store manager can go into the predictive analytics, see what's going on with different stock items, and try to make any decisions. But there's not enough data for us to look at to figure out what would help the user overall. So we just have a couple widgets in that page. And then slippage, overall, there was no endpoint to really meet for that was working. So that page right now is left blank because there's nothing to work on in that case. So then we'll meet and go into the live demo.
All right, so we're going to hop into a video demo here. Now you'll notice we're brought to the landing page. We're going to use Google OAuth to sign in. We're going to put an existing user. We're going to sign in with their credentials. So we're going to put in that username, put in that password. Again, we chose Google OAuth for reasons that will be discussed later in this presentation. Now we're going to sign in, and you'll see that we are brought to the dashboard page. From here, you'll notice that it's a little bit bland at the moment, and that's because we have no widgets. So we can go to the bottom, click Add a Widget, and from here you can actually choose any title of a widget that's on any of the pages. So we can add a widget, and you'll notice that every time we do, there's a pop-up in the top right corner that actually tells you it successfully pinned the widget to the dashboard. So we're going to add 3 widgets for the purpose of this demo, and now here we go, we're adding the third. Great, so we have 3 widgets. Now what can we do with them? So we're going to first demonstrate that you can move them around however you want. So we're going to take the third widget. Let's say we want to replace product sales forecast and wrong price alerts over time. So we'll take those, swap them around, and there you go. Now we'll show how to customize the widgets themselves. So right now we have color customization, so you can actually click on the drop down, change the header color and the text color with that widget, hopefully to make it very identifiable to whoever was using it. They wouldn't even have to really read the header text, they could just find the color and know what it is. And now we're going to show you can remove a widget, and there you go. Now there's only 2 widgets on the page. In the top right corner you'll see the avatar icon. There you'll see profiles and settings. For this is mostly future work, because right now there are currently no really known locations of what's going to go on. So this is mostly future when we have a list of locations in stores. On the left you'll see a side nav. From here you can see all the pages. And you'll notice that I'm circling around the numbers with little text. These are actually, this is our notification system. So what happens here is it's color coded. So green means there's a low amount of alerts. Orange is a medium amount. Red is a high amount. And that about wraps it up for the dashboards. Now we're going to drop into the other pages. So on the prices page, you'll see at first an executive summary of the table data that's below. And this is just for at a glance, so you don't have to look through the entire table if you don't want to. The table itself, you'll see that it's actually searchable. So for example, say we only cared about optimum power blueberry cinnamon flax, you can start typing that in, and there you go, that's all you see. Now if you continue scrolling down, you'll see all the widgets. So here you'll see a pie chart, and if you hover over an individual data piece, you'll actually see more information about that data. On the right of this widget, you'll see a legend, and you can actually interact with this. So if we go to the legend and click, you'll actually enable or disable it from the entire representative pie chart. So let's say we don't care about these products, so we can go ahead and disable them. And now if we like this widget a lot and we want that to be on the dashboard, we can go ahead and pin it to the dashboard from this page. You'll see an alert that is successfully pinned, and now let's visit the dashboard and see it ourselves. There you go. And you'll notice that the legend kept intact. It has the disabled products that you did not want in there. Now we'll go back to prices and visit the other widgets. So here we have 2 more pie charts. These similar functionality, so no need to really dive that into them. On the right you'll see a line graph. So this is actually just a series over time of price alerts that's been happening in the store. If you hover over an individual data, you can actually see the X and Y values in case it was getting a little confusing. Now if we hop into the planogram, from here, this is, like it was mentioned before, this is basically just a map of the store, and right now there's not enough data for us to sufficiently do this. So we are essentially making up a map of the store. We split it up into floor 1 and floor 2, and on this table you'll actually see the data that corroborates the visual mapping above. Right now that table is a little bland. Again, the API does not come with enough data for this, so this will be rectified in the future. Now if you go to the stock page, you'll see a nice big widget up front in your face. To more explain this, we can scroll down to the other tables. So you will see no stock, low stock, and full stock. They're pretty self-explanatory. For anything under that is full, for anything under the other one is low, for anything under that is no. So now to better explain the widget above, this is actually a stacked bar chart. So what happens here is it's taking the category data and showing you how many apply to that one. So in no stock we have 3 products with 2, 8, and 2. And since there's only so many colors, if you're getting a little bit confused, you can actually double click on the legend to the side and isolate that one variable so you can see it's very clearly in low stock and there's 10 of them. Now if we hop over the promotions page, you will see a page pretty similar to prices. It shows an executive summary and a table. Again, a searchable table if you'd like. Over to the product page, you'll see at the top it shows you the best sellers, so the retail or supplier can see right away what products are really doing well in their store. You'll see a pie chart at the bottom that basically tells you which items are expired, discontinued, or invalid, so appropriate action can be taken. Now if we go to the category page, this is really like what kind of food or what kind of item it is, so cereal or dairy, etc. You'll actually notice with the API data we have, it is 100% cereal right now. So not the most useful pie chart, but in the future, again, this will be much more useful to show the different categories of the store. Now if we go to predictive, this is statistical projections based off data that we have. Again, the idea of this is here, and when more data is given in the next team with the new API, they will be able to fill out this page much more. And we're actually going to show now at the top, you'll actually see a search input box. If you click in here, you will notice that you can actually filter a page entirely based off which widgets you want. So let's say we only care about projected. You can just start typing that in, and that's the only widget you'll see. This works across all pages. We chose to show it here because it feels the most representative. It's very obvious here. In slippage, again, mentioned briefly before, this page isn't very relevant right now because the endpoint for this API is not working. So this will conclude the video demo.
Great, now we're going to talk about some design. So initially, right off the bat, we wanted this to be an SBA application for a variety of reasons. One, it's very easy to make very interactive websites, as you can see. It has a great ecosystem. Again, there's tons of libraries for React that we can pull from and utilize. Performance is another big thing as well. There's not many back and forth between the client, between the website and the back end. For our website, though, customization was a cornerstone of this entire app. And we had to have it here because no two managers or stores even care about the same things or the same metrics. And so, again, to account for that, we wanted to make sure we had a good amount of customization in our application to handle that. And the tools we're going to talk about today is the location of the widgets. So as you saw in our demo, no matter where you move the widgets, where they end up, that order will always be preserved. As you saw again in the demo, colors, you can customize the header text and the header background. For navigation, we wanted to have a very consistent experience with our application. So you always want to make sure that our navigation was always on the flush left side of the page. Again, you can collapse it, so if you have a smaller screen, it fits a lot nicer. We didn't show that in this demo, but that's there. For our top bar, again, that's always static. That's always there no matter where you're on the application, whether you scroll up or down the page. It has that nice universal search bar where, again, you can carry over queries between pages. And again, as you saw, we have notifications and pin alerts. So notifications, again, as was mentioned, is a good way to bring a manager's attention to a specific page. And pin alerts are just really good user feedback in general. So now we're going to go over some design choices that we made for this application. So again, we built this with React. That was a great decision. Again, there's a huge ecosystem for it, a lot of great libraries that we used. Very well supported, very easy to learn as well. Redux was our state management application that we used, mainly because all the great benefits that I talked about on the site being that it's very predictable and stuff doesn't just happen. In practice, we saw that this was 100% true. Whenever we had an issue with our application, wanted to debug it, we can go right to the reducer and figure out what's getting passed where. And squashing bugs was very simple because of this. And the OAuth provider that we decided to go with was Google. There was no hard requirement on which OAuth provider we would use. And so we went with this one because we're very familiar with it and it's very easy to implement. And this is our architecture. Pretty simple. Again, the solution that we created was just a website that hits an API. And as you can see down over here, that robot is the 40 space genius in our architecture. Now that could be in a store, there could be a fleet of them. At this point, we don't really know. We haven't had contact with 40 to figure out if they're going to have multiple ones or how that's going to work. But again, for this purpose, we're going to assume there's just one. So again, 40 does its scan, gets the data, sends it to their cloud. Again, that's hosted on 40's own personal environment. And that, again, the API that they created with the test data, that's what's available to us right now. That's what we pull from to populate our website.
So we've come to a few conclusions. As far as what went well, we didn't have a lot of data on our API, but we were able to work around real data with some random data, and we were able to eventually flesh out all of the parts and get some good analytics, and at least what all the tables and graphs and such would actually have on them. We also were very supportive of each other when it came to learning new technical knowledge, especially when it comes to like React and Redux. We didn't have a whole lot of knowledge there, but we were definitely very helpful with each other if we ever had questions. So there's a really good teamwork there. As far as taking the initiative on requirements, since they were kind of a little loose, we definitely took the initiative on doing the design and the content, and so we kind of had some liberty there with what we did. I think it came out pretty well. As far as challenges, the Azure Active Directory was under the RIT subscription, so we couldn't actually use that. We had to use a personal account. Ended up being that setting that up was actually kind of a pain too, so we ended up going with Google OAuth in the end there. There's also some weird minglings of states with the Redux store and like Murray Grid, which was our grid sort of package from NPM. So there were a lot of bugs there, but we squashed most of them, and there's a couple lingering ones which we have documented for the next group. Working with a startup is also a little difficult too. They're kind of on a different sort of process, a little bit of a different cycle there. And so about halfway through our projects, they actually went ahead and made an API 2.0. We're using the old API, but I'm pretty confident that the next group will really like the new API. It's much more semantic and makes more sense. So that's that. As far as communication, we did kind of have to relay between 4D or through DXC to 4D a lot of the time, but we were able to get the proper information and feedback about our site from them. Another thing to note about the API is that we weren't exactly the priority. We're kind of a client-side application. The 4D technology is really kind of trying to get that API from the robot data to the API and cloud storage, and that's kind of their main priority there for now. So in the future, we're definitely going to hand off the documentation and a lot of the resources to the sponsors so that they're ready to go and for future teams to work on. We'd also like to see more store preferences as far as custom planogram diagrams and the UI themes. We'd also like to add some more widgets with different metrics on there as well. We've got a head start on progressive web apps for mobile compatibility, but that also needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. A couple bugs there. And as far as predictive analytics, it would be nice to have some more based on historical data, which as the API gets rolling and store data gets in or fake data for the API comes in, there'll be more of a historic data that we can extrapolate from there. It would also be nice to see actions and hints that the retailers and suppliers can take in real life to fix some of these issues that they see in the notifications on a dashboard. So, for instance, misaligned shelf tags, maybe there's some sort of pop-up there that says, hey, go to aisle 5 and fix these products and make sure they're all nice and tidy. So with that, thank you. Any questions?
I think you touched on this, but you said you had a lot of issues with the lack of data supplied by the API. Did you design specific data that you think might be supplied in the future and then use that to test? Or how did you overcome just the lack of general data?
So one thing with the API, with the test data, was that it was all on the exact same time slot. So like the predictive analytics, like you can't just base everything off of one time. So we kind of auto-generated it, so it would be kind of like over like a certain time span of like a month or so, just to have at least like some simulation there. But that's basically all we could really do in that case for overcoming that.
Was the use of Azure requirement from the sponsor, or if not? What were some of the challenges there?
So Azure was a requirement from our sponsor. That was one of the harder requirements that they had. But as far as other requirements go, they were pretty flexible.
And what kind of experiences did you have with the platform, and what kind of challenges did you face?
Not many. Again, we use it just as if deployed it. So we deployed on that. That's pretty much the extent of it.
The challenge came in with it came up in the slide, the Active Directory. Originally we were trying to use that for OAuth, but we were running into some weird issues with RIT accounts and not having access to it. I mean, personal, and it was getting pretty weird. So we ended up just going with Google OAuth because we had no real requirement for which auth to use.
So you guys can handle a lot of the data stuff, and UI was obviously a primary aspect of this. Did you consider any usability testing?
We did not conduct usability testing, although that is a good idea. We should probably document it.
Again, we did check up with the sponsors every week, so they did have an idea of what we've deployed to the official site.
Also to note, it is a little bit, it's not exactly set in stone who even the end users are at the moment, so it'd be kind of hard to usability test it realistically. But yeah.
I think we saw a hand over here. Do you have a question? Or?
More of a comment regarding like what was the motivation behind the significant use of eye charts with respect to that and usually not being very readable.
For the widgets. It was just something that made sense in some cases. We felt it was better that way.
Yes, a lot of time, like a lot of the, for example, like the prices page, like again, some of the pie charts we have, I read about 2 big ones. It would just show like the ownership of like how many, like it might be like 4 or 5 products, let's say it belong to Kellogg's, and let's say they were all put in the wrong spot. I wanted to show like how many wrong things they got on that shelf. If that makes sense, yeah, try more.
Other questions, please? Maybe you mentioned it, but what was the plugin that you used that did the graph analysis?
Quality data as an NPM library.
All right, that's thank you.
All right, welcome everybody. We're Team Sports Guys, and our project is Athletic. I'm Brian Jacobs. I'm the Team Scrum Master, the DevOps guy, and resident sports expert.
Hi, so I'm Owen Dong. I'm our team coordinator and our product owner.
I'm Dan Fisher. I'm the team's UI guy.
I'm Ryan Herzl. I'm the security and QA guy.
And just as a summary of what we're going to go through here today, we're going to start off with the context of our project. We're going to then talk about the needs of Athletic and what the requirements that we got from them were. We're going to talk about what challenges we faced when trying to meet those requirements, our eventual delivered product, the tech stack we used, and the architecture and design that we chose. Then we're going to take you through a nice video demo. Then we're going to talk about our process and how we came to such a great application, and just a final summary and future goals at the end.
Okay, so to give you guys some context about what Athletic is currently a sports management platform being used by New York high school sports, specifically Section 5 and Section 6. And if you're not entirely sure what those are essentially the way New York organizes high school sports. Currently manages a lot of things like teams, their standings, their schedules, and a lot more than that. But unfortunately, the system is an older system now, over a decade in the making, and it's proving to be very difficult to maintain and even harder to add new features to this old product because it was very custom made for New York high school sports and some of the sections that I mentioned earlier. This means that it's very, very difficult for Athletic to grow and expand to new audiences, such as, say, other states or other sports currently not supported, and the system is now in need of a technological update. So that's where we come in. As team sports guys, we are here to build Athletic V2. And there were a lot of goals that came in with us building this project, and they're listed there as saying that we want to improve the ease of use of the product, improving the extensibility of the product, as well as the maintainability of the product. In addition, while keeping those elements in mind, we're also to overhaul the system to add additional features desired by the current audience, as well as the project sponsor, while also removing some of the old architecture and limitation that has prevented Athletic from growing and moving forward into the 2020s. And the MVP of the product is to essentially deliver something that could be used to replace current Athletic while keeping in mind all of the above. Now, as some of you may have surmised, the scope here for this project is quite a bit larger than originally foreseen. And in addition to that, our initial team estimates quickly proved themselves to be a little too optimistic. There were some red flags that were raised early on that were missed and weren't correctly acted upon by the team. And around midway through last semester, it became apparent that the initial scope was unfeasible and it was proving very difficult to deliver the full product such that it could be used to replace the current Athletic system in use. But we took a different approach. After winter semester, we regathered, recouped, and switched gears. We met in the middle and compromised with the project sponsor since we realized that the new system wouldn't be ready for production by the end of year. Then we should instead be focusing, instead of building a fully functional system, we should be building a system that is very, very amicable to future growth. And we built to support the current and future users, as well as laying the groundworks for the future expansions of the application to come. In addition to that, we also committed to building out one user persona, specifically the coach persona, which we'll go into more detail later, to set the standard for what the look and the feel of the application, as well as committing to extensive documentation so that information isn't lost in the transfer between our project. So to talk about the delivered product, this is what we did deliver. We delivered a fully dynamic sports league management platform. Now, what that means is that in our current system, the new Athletic, you can go create your own self-defined sport with your own win conditions, with your own player number, with your own team counts, and then you can create an entire league around that sport. You could go in and you can create the NFL, you could create the NBA, you could create any sports league that you can think of, and you can have teams compete within this self-created league with your own sports and attributes created to support this. In basketball, you have baskets and points, but in something like football, you have yards. A lot of these supporting features are necessary to create this fully dynamic sports league. In addition to that, we've also built a very solid backend. Our entire backend is built out with REST API access, and the infrastructure is already built and ready for use. The coach persona is also in a very solid place, as it was determined to be the most valuable user role to the project sponsor, but the front end could use some additional polish.
All right, so as was alluded to, the previous Athletic system was built over 10 years ago, and it was initially constructed using Cold Fusion, which is a very old framework that doesn't exist anymore. So we wanted to bring it in with new technologies and a modern framework. So the stack we chose was, on the front end, React. common one that other teams have used here for senior projects. Along with it, we chose Semantic UI, which is a really great library that allowed us to build out features very quickly and build out a nice looking product without us having to worry about styles. On the middleware on our server is Spring Boot, which is a Java-based web application server that we used to build out all of our APIs. To communicate to our database, we used Hibernate, which is a ORM that really helped us move quickly without having to write SQL statements. And our database was MySQL Server as well.
So, because our product has so many features, we've taken the liberty of pre-populating some things, such as accounts and games, ahead of time so that we don't spend another 5 minutes sitting here setting everything up. We'll start out by logging into our coach account. As you can see, the default fan persona page doesn't have a lot on it. This is because of our focus on the coach persona. This actual account has 3 personas, 2 coach accounts and the fan persona. We'll go ahead and switch to our hackers persona now. So the default page for the homepage for the coach persona has unreported competitions that haven't been scored yet, upcoming competitions for this team, and recent competitions that have been played in this league. We'll now go over creating a competition as a coach. So we have data such as the type of game, the location it's being played at. You can select 2 of any teams in your team group structure. It doesn't restrict you to using your own team in here, but will not allow you to create a competition in which your team does not play. You can add and remove teams to a competition with those buttons. This is to allow multi-team competitions such as golf to have as many number of competitors as needed. So you can see that our competition now shows up in our upcoming competitions. But what happens if you created a competition with the wrong information? Luckily, we allow our coaches to edit the data that a competition has. Next up, we're going to be going over completing a competition. So we select one that's unreported. It has already happened, but has not been scored yet. Now, the quick way is as easy as putting your scores in at the top there, and all you have to do is hit complete. Now, we also have a more thorough and in-depth way of completing competitions that we'll go over in just a second. And you can see that the scores got put in and it was no longer editable. So we'll select another unreported. Oh, you can see that it now shows up in our recent competition results. So this is another competition that is unreported, and our more thorough reporting process starts with the roster tab. Here you can set the roster that the team played with for this specific competition. You can either create a new one from blank or import it from your current team roster. So these are the players currently on the Packers. Next, you can input statistics that your players earned and team stats that were earned in this game. We support aggregated team stats so that players' stats that you would like automatically summed up do. So all the points that players scored personally show up aggregated at the bottom. You can also edit that separately without affecting the player stats earned. We also support units such as whole numbers, decimal numbers, percentages, and times. Next up is the condition tab. This allows you to save the weather that was happening at the time of the game and the field condition at the time of the game. And finally, we come to the Finish tab, where you submit the final scores for the teams, and you complete the competition.
Great. Now, everything you just saw was only possible because your account was associated with a team that was on that competition. That's why you could edit it and complete the competition. So now we're going to go ahead and switch to a persona, say the Saints coach, that was not part of this team. Now you can see that none of these fields are editable anymore. The edit button doesn't show up, And the tabs at the top change because you're in a view-only mode. You cannot complete the competition from here or edit it in any way. This is how a fan would see it as well. Now, let's go back to the home page because you can see now that there's different competitions that show up here because I'm a different coach. In the recent competitions component that shows in the middle there, that shows all of the competitions that have recently been completed within your team group. So for us, all the competitions that have been completed for teams within the NFC group that contains the Saints. And so for here, you can see the Panthers and the Buccaneers. That's one competition that the other team did not have access to. So let's go to the team page. This is the Saints page. This is where the coach can go to update and edit and view any information about that team. So they can go to edit the information, change their name, change their description, and they could also change the colors for the team, primary, secondary, tertiary, and if you change those hexes, they would reflect the color that shows up in the top. Now, as you saw on completing competition, teams have a roster. So when we scroll down here, you're going to see that this team has his roster right here. So we can go ahead and add a player to that team pretty easily by clicking this button and opening up a modal. We can do that by clicking this type ahead search feature. We can search for a player by name or create a new one there. We're going to add this player that's already in the system. And then since we've just added this player, we want to associate some different stuff with him. So we're going to change his position to be QB and jersey number to be 1. We want him to be the guy wearing jersey number 1. He's our new quarterback. And we're going to go change the previous quarterback to be deactivated. We don't want him to show up on future rosters. He's still playing on the team, but maybe he got a head injury, can't play right now. As an experiment, we're also going to just delete somebody from the team to show that we can. So this is removing somebody from the team. This is like saying a player has been traded off of the Saints. They don't play for our team anymore. Further down, you can see team home locations. So these are like the stadiums that your team plays in. You can have multiple of those if you want. Some teams have multiple home locations. You can remove home locations or edit and add new ones. Ours is the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Even further down the page is our team stats. So this is an aggregated statistical view of all the competitions that our team has completed within the season, for us, regular season 2019. Now, at the top of this page, you can see the breadcrumb that shows the team group organizational structure that the Saints lives within. So if we click through here, you can see that we can navigate around through our tree-like structure in a composite pattern that we built as a very dynamic solution to this really complex tree problem. So you can navigate around here and view all the different teams within the structure. You can click on a team group's page to view different things about the team group. One thing is competitions that have been completed within that team group and within the season. So for here, we can change the season that those team groups would show up in. So competitions that were completed in a different season would show up there as well. Also, you can see on the right-hand side, we've re-implemented that component. We didn't have to change any code. We've just shoved it in on the right for navigation. It's a reusable module. We reuse it all across the app in different ways that let us select teams, select team groups in a dynamic Google Drive-like fashion. Now we're going to go back to the home page and log out so we can show you some administrator features.
So we'll start by logging back in as an admin. Everything you've seen in the system has been built to be as customizable as possible. While we were developing it, we basically kept in mind, would this work for golf? So the admin has a ton of pages on the left bar that lets them control essentially every facet of our system. We'll start off by going to the locations page. So on this page, you can see a comprehensive list of every location in the system. It's paginated. And if a team has one of these locations as its home location, you can navigate to that team page by pressing its team name. This is the accounts page. From here, an admin can see all the pertinent data for accounts, such as name and email, and they can even add new personas to accounts. This is how we added the 2 coach personas to our earlier account. Next up, admins can also create competitions regardless of the subscription status of the involved teams. If a coach tried to create a competition where neither teams had a valid subscription, it wouldn't let them. This is the seasons page. From here, admins can create, view, and modify all the seasons in the system. And here we have the subscriptions page, where you can create, view, and modify all the subscriptions. Subscriptions are how we control our competition functionality, and that's how we'll be monetizing the system in the future. The attributes system is the backbone of the customizability of our system. Let's say you wanted all of the teams in your team group to have mascots, and for that to be displayed on your team page. You can create a team attribute to do just that. If you want to have preferred player positions on your rosters, you can create a roster attribute for that. This is built to give you as much control as possible over the data in your team group. And this is where stat types get created. You can create new stat types for your team group so that only your system, only our customer's specific team group has those stats. You can also create them at the highest level of the team group structure to have them be truly universal stats. You can also create, view, and edit new sports in the system with different numbers of competitors. Admins can also create new teams and new team groups. We have really built this system to be as customizable for individual customers as possible.
All right, so how did we make such an amazing application? The process we used was Scrum with a bit of feature-driven development. We had current athletic, so we had a huge list of features that we wanted to implement. So that's where we put in FDD. We defined all the features that we wanted and started designing them right away, just because we had them. Scrum was useful for us because as we went through, we realized we didn't just want to copy the old system, we wanted to change some of the requirements we had and make it more extensible. So that's where it was useful for us. In the end, we completed over 300 user stories, we put in over 1,400 project hours, and we've written over 24,000 lines of code. So in summary, what went well and what didn't go well. First, we made significant process on the back end. We have a robust REST API that does a lot of stuff, and we have very clean and functional designs for a lot of the complex problems that we encountered. A lot of the core functionality is also built out. We went through it all in the demo, but a lot of that stuff is very essential to Athletic. It's the most prioritized stuff, and that's all out of the way. And security works as intended. So all of the user roles, that was a big epic for us, and implementing all of that, it works great. Things that didn't go well is we had a lot of scope struggles. We started off with a huge scope, and we had to narrow it down. We narrowed it down to focus on just one persona, and there was a lot of push and pull between us and our sponsor just to kind of find that where we wanted to be. We also didn't have a clear front-end UI design. We were, again, focusing on the functionality and just making the UI functional, not the best it could be. And DevOps isn't as convenient as it could have been. Right now, we are doing manual deployments when we build. We wanted to have something automatic set up for our sponsors so that we could just hand it off at the end of the year and be like, here it is, it's set up, you never have to touch it again. Whereas now it will be, all right, every time you want to submit code and push to production, you have to follow a couple steps. The future goals for this project are implementing all the features and personas that we didn't get to. Because we have feature-driven design, a lot of this is planned out and designed already, and we have stories in our backlog for them. We just didn't have time to get to them. We also want a polished front-end user experience. We have a functional one, but we want to make it better and just perfect for all the end customers. We also want data migration. Current Athletic has historical data from all 10 years that it has been in use, so we want to pull that data from current Athletic into the new system and the new database. And lastly, we want user testing. We didn't get to do user testing because we just were focusing on all of the functionality. We would like to get a lot of the local coaches who already use the system and test it out, click around, and just validate that what we made is what they want. Are there any questions? Nothing, guys? No?
fun did you have this project?
So much fun, Coach Martinez.
There's always a trade-off between fun and hard work. So, to be commended. How certain are you that this project would continue?
I think everything we've built can be used by future teams, and it's definitely set up well for round 2.
I mean, currently as it is right now, there's no reason why you couldn't go into the system and build your own little like family league for soccer. If like your uncle's family plays soccer against your family, if you wanted to do something like that, there's nothing stopping you from doing that other than some logistics involved, such as whether the administrator would give you an account and you should be able to like pre-populate a lot of these things, and the user experience isn't that polished, but it is a usable system. It's just not quite at the level that we'd like it to be to replace the current system, which many of the current users are very attached to, given that they've been using it for 10 years. And if you want to make a big jump away like that, you have to deliver not just the current experience, but the current experience and a lot more.
You mentioned that the admin user can basically do whatever he wants in the system, right? What kind of person has an admin account?
Yeah, so for us, the admin is really our sponsor, Sean. So he's the current administrator for his current athletic platform, but a lot of his administration tasks that he has to do in current athletic is actually like doing database insert statements to add people and create new teams. He does with database insert statements and all that. And so our platform helps to make sure his administration is a lot easier than it was before.
And to kind of piggyback off that question, there is an additional persona plan, which is the manager, which is very much like the admin, but with a very limited, restricted abilities to do certain things. So if you were the manager at the NFL, you couldn't go in and make changes to like NBA teams, etc.
Right. But you would be able to set up your entire team group structure, create all your teams, so Sean wouldn't have to be doing that for every team group that he onboards.
I understand your intermediary level or layer is different, but how similar is your current data structure to the one that had existed before in your database?
It's pretty different.
Okay.
Yep.
Vastly different.
Vastly different. His system was not set up to be reusable in any way, right? So he would create, basically every sport has its own table, and every team has its own table as well, and things like that. So the way he manages team groups and things is not like we did with the composite pattern in tables. So it's going to be difficult to migrate the data, but.
To piggyback off of that, we handle historical data very well. When you change your player attributes that you would see from competition, we keep the old data in the system and we create a new player attribute value with the new value that you actually see from the players page. So when you look at competitions historically, you see all the old data. In the old system, this was accomplished by essentially copying over the whole database and emptying out the data for the new year.
Yeah, they'd have one database per season.
Taking into account the users that are used to the old system, did the old visual design influence this new one at all? Are they going to be used to it going into it?
The old design was definitely a website straight out of 2008, and it didn't really have a lot of the software engineering practices that we now use. It was very much like the old design was very, very not what Sean wanted for this new application, just to put it that way.
So to go on that, there were pages that we mimicked, like team page, right? Things like that exist in a system that we need to also recreate in our system. But there were things that we could improve, like the home page is different. That didn't really exist. There's no news feedy type style in the old application.
Let's thank the team.
Hey everyone. We are Team Smarticus. I'm Christian.
I'm Joey.
I'm Alex. I'm Zach.
Our faculty coach was Parul Patel, and our sponsors were Jamie Whiteman and Ellie Stevens. We have been working with Lockheed Martin to create the SMART system, or the Software Maintenance Asset Repository and Tracking System. So just to go through the things that we'll be talking about today, we'll start with some context around the product we built, the tech stack that we used, the architecture around our product, the accomplishments that we did throughout the last 2 semesters, a demo of our product, a reflection of everything we went through, the future of smarts in Lockheed Martin, and then questions from you guys. So, start with some context. Lockheed Martin is the largest aerospace and defense company in the world. There are 4 divisions to Lockheed Martin: the Aeronautics Division, Missiles and Fire Control, Space, or Rotary and Mission Systems, which is RMS, and that's the one that we've been working with. So currently, RMS maintains thousands of software assets in a very complex and large Excel spreadsheet. This process to be able to jump into an Excel spreadsheet is very complex, and not just any user in Lockheed Martin can go ahead and edit it. So it's very error prone because there's no validation to the data that they're putting in, and multiple people can't be editing it at the same time. Also, since it's just a file, it's not very secure, as opposed to a website that is secure, that could be secure. So here comes our solution, which is SMARTS, this Software Maintenance Asset Repository and Tracking System. So this is a website that is meant to replace the current process that they're using in the Excel spreadsheet. It streamlines the process that they were doing before, making it more accessible to any user in Lockheed Martin with their login information. They could just go ahead, log in into our website, and be able to do everything, but way easier. It's less error prone because there'll be validation in all the forms and fields. And it's much more efficient for all the users, and allowing multiple people to be accessing it at the same time.
So some of the high-level requirements that we had for SMARTS were that users needed to be able to manage assets, vendors, portfolios, and then budgets for assets and portfolios. They also need to be able to request renewal on assets. So if they had an asset that reached its renewal date, they would have to be able to send an email notification to the portfolio owner and to the financial admin to let those guys know that they need to log into SMARTS to either approve or deny the user's request to renew the asset. SMARTS also needs to be able to import existing data so that Lockheed Martin doesn't have to go in and manually enter all their existing data into the system. We also had to use Tableau to create dashboards and reports of asset data, and we also had to have group-based access levels and usage of a relational database. We had one main thing that was out of scope, that was creating a mobile application. We decided to instead just create a single mobile-friendly web page that would allow users to progress an asset through its renewal workflow. And this is the primary feature that Lockheed Martin wanted from the mobile version anyway. We had a few stretch goals, as you can see, and we met a couple of them. This semester, we implemented user management, and then we also re-implemented asset creation from the first semester, so they would provide a better user experience.
Okay, and now to talk briefly about some of the technologies that we used. So Lockheed Martin specifically requested that we utilize .NET when making this application, and we went with .NET MVC. But Lockheed Martin in general uses a lot of Microsoft products for their own internal services, so it was as a result of that we also went with Microsoft SQL Server and Active Directory. From a front-end standpoint, we went with things like Bootstrap, jQuery, and most notably Tableau for the aforementioned dashboards. And for our testing suite, we went with Catalan, Selenium, and NUnit to go through unit testing and acceptance testing. So to talk about the architecture, that previous implementation of .NET MVC informed our decision to use a model view controller architecture. This is not a publicly accessible website. This is a web application that will be used exclusively internally within Lockheed Martin, and users can connect to it through their intranet, through either their smartphone or computer. That allows them to access the view layer, which allows them to edit any asset information or portfolios or any other data that they need to. That information is passed through the control layer and then through the model data access layer. Any changes are passed through Lockheed Martin's internal server and then passed onto their SQL database. And any changes to Tableau and Active Directory will be handled through Lockheed Martin itself. They have their own implementation of Tableau's API and their own Active Directory that they'll be implementing that we weren't allowed to handle for security purposes, but that we set up a framework for. And now to talk about some of our accomplishments over the last 2 semesters. So on the left, we have the first semester feature plan that we had set forward to us. Most of them were completed in the first semester, but some of them we completed in the second semester. And on the second semester is every feature that we've implemented in the second semester. And one thing you might notice is that all of these are green check marks because we implemented every main feature that Lockheed Martin requested. Specifically in the second semester, we focused on things like user groups and access levels, user management, portfolio management, budget management, data export, and most notably a testing framework to ensure that the product was up to high quality. And now over for a brief demonstration.
So, welcome to Smarts. This is our login page. We're going to go ahead and log in as a basic user right now. And every single user in the system has the same two tables on their home screen. The action required table, which only has assets that currently need renewal. And you'll see right there that these two assets have the status of need renewal. And then the all my assets table, which has all the assets related to that user. In this case, it shows, since I'm a basic user, it shows assets of which I'm an owner of. So we'll see that these two assets I'm an owner of, and my name is John Smith here. And now we're going to go ahead and create a new asset. We're going to speed through this form to be able to just quickly create an asset. And I'm going to make myself the primary asset, the primary owner of this asset. And also we're going to make the renewal date of tomorrow. So in order to not overwhelm the user with all the information that you can initially fill in into an asset with all its details, we gave them the option to fill them in now or later. So we just decided to fill them in now, and it opened up the edit panel for this specific asset. You'll see here that you can, all the information you just input is right there for you to edit if you made a mistake, or if you want to go ahead and fill out all the rest of the more complex information like you see here. So we're going to now, in order to save time, since this asset has no information yet, we're going to run through all the possible information that could be within one asset. So this is the basic information you just saw. Then there's also the asset details, more filled in. And next, we'll move on to the procurement information. Both the procurement information and budgets are by year. So the procurement information is information about how the asset was acquired, and the forms in order to edit or create budgets and procurement information are very similar to the assets, so we're not going to run through those. Next, we'll be running through the asset renewal process. So we'll see that we're on the action required table, and this asset needs renewal. I'm currently logged in as a basic level user. Since it's a multi-step process, I'm going to have to request renewal from the next person up, which is the portfolio owner. So we can see that we just successfully requested renewal for this asset, asset sample 1. We're going to go ahead and log in as the portfolio owner, because you'll see now that the asset now says portfolio owner action required. So we're logging in as the portfolio owner right now. And they have the same asset in the table with the same status. So they're going to follow the same process in order to progress the renewal even further to the final step, who is they're going to request renewal from the financial person in the system. So at this step, either the portfolio owner or the financial person can actually decline renewal of it, and it'll be sent back to the basic user. At every step of this process, emails are sent to those users in the system of the current status of the current step in the renewal process. So we'll see that we just requested a renewal from the financial person, and we're going to log in as the financial person to make the final decision of actually renewing it. They're going to follow the same exact process, select confirm, and we're going to scroll down and see that the asset now has a renewal date of 2020, which is a year from today. That's it for asset renewal.
All right, so now I'm going to show you guys reporting and dashboards. So, oh, maybe not. Why is it not going backwards? All right, reporting and dashboards. So if you go up to the top here and click on reporting and dashboards, it'll bring us to an empty table because we don't have any data for this report. So if we switch over to a report that has some data, this table is showing us basically various budget information for certain assets, such as the initial budget and then how much we actually ended up spending on that asset, as well as a 1, 2, and 3 year projection, which is based on the vendor escalation. So in this case, Microsoft has a 5% default escalation, so you can see that the budget is escalating by 5% every year. This allows us to help plan for the future. This table can also be downloaded as a CSV or as an Excel file, and that's basically what all reports look like. So now I'm going to go over dashboards. So if we click on Change Dashboard Report, switch over to a dashboard. Dashboards are basically a visual representation of reports, and these were made using Tableau. This particular dashboard shows us two things. One is a pie chart that shows us each portfolio in the system and how many assets are overdue within each portfolio, and then a more specific breakdown below within each portfolio So you can see specifically which assets are overdue and also how far overdue they are. So for example, the first asset here, asset 39, is 136 days beyond its renewal date. So that's how dashboards work. So now I'm going to show you guys the portfolios page. So when you click on portfolios, it'll show you all of the portfolios in the system, as well as the current year's budget, if it has one, and whether or not that budget has been approved. So you can create a portfolio and edit it exactly like you could with an asset, so we aren't really going to go through that. But we will go through creating a budget for this portfolio that doesn't have a budget. So if we click on the option cog and click create budget, we can fill this in real quick for a fake budget for 2019. Hit confirm, and you'll see that it does create a budget, but that budget has not been approved yet. So a financial admin can now log in, go to this portfolio, which I am a financial admin right now, hit approve budget, select the year they want to approve it for, and then hit approve. The last thing you can do with portfolios is view budget data for them. So you can click on a budget and click view budgets. It'll show you all the assets under that portfolio and their budgets. And then it'll show you the sum of all those budgets next to the portfolio budget for that year. So you can compare these values to see if they are out of sync or if they are in line with each other.
Alrighty, so to talk to you guys a little bit about importing, as we said, a big part of this was to make sure that they don't have to take their Excel sheet of about 136 columns and manually enter all that information themselves. So we made 3 import features, one for assets, one for vendors, and one for asset actuals. Going into the asset import, they can take a file that they have and click confirm. It'll take a second to spin up, and then once it's all set, it'll show you all the assets that were in that. In this particular case, the validation had failed. What that means is there was errors in the file, and what they can do is they can click the plus sign there and see every particular error for each line in the file so that they know where to go back and fix it so that the system doesn't ingest bad data. So assuming that they see this, they've done that, they've gone back and fixed the problem, they can now pick a fix file. It'll basically do the same thing, except for this time, it'll end up saying asset validation successful. When it's successful, you can see the assets that were successfully imported or seen in the file. You can see all of its details, the employees, like who owns it, who was the purchase requester for that asset. The procurement information, like Christian said, was the financial info of how they acquired that asset. And then the budgets for the particular year, whatever was provided in the file will be present. So once they've gone through and they've checked all this and they want to actually get it into the system, they can go ahead and hit confirm. It'll take a second to actually insert those records into the database, but when it finishes, it'll bring you back to the home page. And on the home page, you can now see that we actually have assets in the system. All that information that we just imported is present, and you can click through it and edit it and manage it, just as Christian described a moment ago. Going up to the vendor importing. Vendor importing is very similar. You take your vendor file, you add it, and confirm. It'll show up with the same type of grid, except for vendor importing doesn't have to have everything 100% correct in a sense that you could have records that already exist in the system. Those records just won't be used. So when you go ahead and hit confirm there, in that sense, it'll bring you to the vendors page. When it brings you to that vendors page, at the bottom here you can see that the 2 new vendors that we imported are present. On this page you can create new vendors just like you can with the assets. You can edit and manage the vendors that are already present in the system. And jumping over to importing actuals, which is how they acquire that, or how much money they spend on the asset each year, how much it costs to renew it and whatnot, you can import that information into the system as well. In this particular case, it matches on purchase orders, but that is an interface that Lockheed Martin will need to implement just because that was a out-of-scope option that they wanted to take care of themselves. So we've implemented the stubs to really set them up to do that so that when we hand off the project, it's easy for them to take over.
All right, now we're going to talk briefly about access levels. There are 4 access levels within Smarts: the administrator, the basic Smarts user, the portfolio owners, and the financial personnel. As an admin, you are allowed to not only view all of the access levels of each individual user type, but also edit them. In this particular instance, we're editing the basic Smarts user to no longer have access to dashboards and portfolios. So we click confirm. Again, only an admin can do this. We expand it, we see that the page access has indeed been marked false for both dashboards and portfolios. And then we can log out and log in as a basic Smarts user to see what kind of access has changed for us. So as we can see, the portfolios is no longer an accessible option in the nav bar. And rather than dashboards and reporting, there is just reporting. And if we go to the reporting page, we can view the reports just as normal, but note we can no longer view the dashboards. And from that, we can also talk about user management as a whole. Admins can also manage each individual user and all of their information. In this instance, we can change the name and the email address of a particular user, and then click Save. We can then edit the access level of a user. So we can select one of the 4 access levels. For instance, we can change this Smarts user into the financial personnel, and click Confirm. And as you can see, it's reflected there. And the administrator can also delete any user of their choosing. From there, there's also a main data export feature for the admin. Similar to how the reports could be exported as a CSV file, the main data that exists in the database can also be exported as in a CSV file. There are several rules and guidelines which are outlined there, and from here the admin can enter a fiscal year. If they choose not to, it'll just give them the data from every fiscal year. They can choose which types of data they want to export. In this instance, we're selecting the asset and asset details. You can also export things like budgets, procurement information, and vendors. And we're also including additional details in the child tables for both the asset and asset detail. Some special options include things like including inactive records and including when the assets were created, when they were last updated, and who created them. And as you can see, that downloads a CSV file for you when you click Generate Files.
All right, to give a little bit about the reflection of the project as a whole, some challenges we ran into. Mid-year or mid-semester this past semester here, we had a core structure rework and refactor that definitely took a good chunk of our time. Basically what had happened was we had missed a requirement regarding procurement information and importing those actuals at the beginning in the first semester, and because of that we had to completely restructure one of our core data objects in the system. So in doing that, it had some changes that happened in the UI, had some changes that happened in the back end, and it was just something that we had to overcome. We also had challenges with underestimating our feature development. Some of our estimations were a little too optimistic and things ran a little bit over. But we did meet every single deadline that we had set. It just took a little bit more some sleepless nights. And in terms of other challenges, we did not do so well with risk tracking and mitigation, especially towards the end of this past semester here. As more of the features sped up and we needed to get more and more out there, our process end of things kind of fell off the map a little bit. And that was definitely something that we felt whenever we encountered something that we had not really planned for. And as it says, busy schedules. 3 of us have full-time jobs, and as you can expect, being a full-time student and having a full-time job doesn't really mesh very well. Some things that went well and some improvements over last semester. Better time estimation. While we did still have a challenge with it, our estimations were much better than the first semester because some of our estimations were things of like 10 hours versus an actual 40 hours, which is not super great. And we had an equal workload distribution. Last semester we didn't really have a very even distribution of the work between us, but this semester we really picked it up and made sure that everyone was doing everything equally so that none of us were too stressed out. Some general positives. We definitely made a good use of everyone's individual skill sets. We made sure that the right person was on the right job. And a huge thing this semester was having a testing suite. First semester we didn't have one yet, but this semester because we had one, it enabled us to identify bugs quickly and allow us to make sure that we were developing the quality project that we wanted to do.
Okay, so there's just a few things to cover for the future of smarts. Firstly, there's 3 required things that Lockheed Martin's going to have to do when we hand this off to them. One is they're going to have to integrate smarts with their own Active Directory and their own Tableau server, as well as they will have to integrate with their financial ledger system. These are just things that we didn't have access to for security reasons, and so they'll have to take the stubs that we put in place and switch it over and make small tweaks so that it works with their system. And then there's just some general improvements that could be made in the future if they want. They could switch to the entity framework, which is a different way for the application to speak with the database. It's kind of more modern. There's also the possibility of adding on-the-spot fixing of imported bad data. So when you import data, if something's wrong with it, you wouldn't have to leave the app to fix it and then try again. Across the board, there could be some UI enhancements to improve the user experience. And then there also could be a full mobile application that is stood up that would have all of the features that the desktop version has. And with that, we would like to just say special thanks to our sponsor team, Jamie and Ellie, who are our core sponsors, and then we also had Jeff and Frankie last semester who helped us with a couple technical issues, and then our coach, Parul, who was always there to make sure that we were meeting our deadlines and producing quality content. So are there any questions?
Yes. On the homepage for the attention needed table, will those always have the status of expired or needs renewal?
There's a few different statuses within the system. You can have something that needs renewal. You can have something that needs more information. As Christian explained when he was going through the renewal process, if someone in the path says, no, we're declining this for now, you're asked to provide a reason as to why you are declining it. And if that reason is just, oh, well, you're missing the budget for 2019, so we can't approve this until that's set up and done, it would get sent back to the user with that status, and it would show up still under the portfolio owner and that particular user, but it just would have a different status. So there's a few other key statuses that we use.
In that case, it would just say needs information, or needs more information.
Yeah. Another status is discontinued, if an asset is discontinued.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned you had all the requirements to meet for this project, but then you had future improvements. Is that meant to be like internally with Lockheed, or is there a potential like spec increase to it?
From the standpoint of the senior project, of us taking it over and stuff, we've done everything that they've asked of it as a senior project. The three things that we had that were as main future features were meant to be internal to Lockheed Martin since the beginning. We didn't have access to their Active Directory server, so we set up our own and set it up so that they could easily swap it over when they get to it, but because of security reasons, we can't have access to that. And similar situation for their Tableau server and their financial ledger system, because obviously us as senior project individuals, we can't have access to Lockheed Martin's financial numbers.
Yep. You mentioned it basically practices all of Lockheed Martin's acceptance criteria for in terms of requirements. Was there an extensive amount of usability testing done on the system, or did you guys decide to let Lockheed Martin figure it out?
It was more based on our feedback from every week that we communicate with them, just making sure that they accept it rather than going in getting it tested with actual users. Yeah, that's what we were mainly focusing on.
There was a couple of demos we made that were to the actual like potential end users, people in the company who would be using it, so we could get their feedback that way. But there was no like direct user feedback.
Let's thank the team.
were the Django translators. I'm Beltran Calis, this is Matt Zikrin, Dylan Forrest, and Yurel Castillo. And today we're going to show you IntelliReview 2.0. So let me give you a little background about the company. Language Intelligence is a language translation services company based in Rochester. It was founded in 1988, and they specialize in language and culture training services, interpreting services, as well as language translation services. This is their second time they sponsor a senior project at RIT. So what is the problem Language Intelligence has? The problem is they need a way to efficiently translate and review files. This involves a lot of people in the process, such as project stakeholders, the clients, the project managers, and the people that are actually translating the files. So this involves high customer collaboration. They have an existing solution, but it was created in 2006. So it is outdated, and they want to improve in terms of performance, UI, and UX. So the solution to this problem is a platform that allows for efficient reviews for translations. This platform allows for encapsulation and preservation of the original files format, as well as the translated files format, as well as the structure, no matter what the file extension is. This supports customizable style sheets, allowing the translator or the reviewer to choose their own CSS style for say, or customize a style for the translation and the original document. Overall, this increases the security of the app as well as decreasing the whole cluster. So Language Intelligence has 3 different products, and we're going to show you where IntelliReview fits into the process. First, they have IntelliPortal, where the project is first created and the client provides the original surveys and files to be translated. Then IntelliTranslate is the second row here, where the translators actually translate the files and work with the project managers on what needs to be done, what needs to be changed. And then there's IntelliReview, where suggestions and comments are made as well as reviews, and it goes back and forth with the whole translation and reviewing process until it's completely done. Once the customer is satisfied, then they provide the actual file, both translated and original, to the client.
So here's a little bit more about the domain. As you can see, we've got a project manager. The project manager can create a project, upload these already translated files that have both the original content and the translated content, but the content needs to be reviewed. So we have, the reviewers can leave feedback in the way of comments or suggestions. Eventually, those comments or suggestions will be accepted or rejected, and they can enact the export functionality, which will apply those changes to a finalized document, a finalized file, and produce it using the parser, the same parser mechanism that extracts all the content from the SDLXlif file format. Our scope commitment started off pretty large. We had to eventually tone it down a little bit. We had initially committed to doing concurrent editing as well as export functionality. This is our current scope commitment as we've figured it out with our sponsor. And mainly the issue that we had was figuring out how much time the parser was actually going to take. It was the real engine, the real mechanism that holds the backbone to this app, and we didn't really account for how much complexity it would have in it. In fact, there was a large period of time where we would go, we finished the parser, it's done, parser's done, and then we'd get another test file from our sponsor, which would break everything, and we didn't recognize there was a use case in there that we had to fix. And this actually happened for quite a few weeks. So we felt really bad about that. We really wanted to accomplish more than what we had, but we feel like we've done a fair amount as it is towards that goal.
So as far as what Dylan said, the parser is the primary component of this application, of this web application that we've created. So most of the architecture design that we decided to focus on was primarily on the parser. The largest part, the biggest idea that we took from the previous team was they tried to implement a strategy pattern to account for all the different kinds of files that you could potentially parse with this system. Doc,
XML, PDFs, and all different kinds of translated files that would be converted to a SDLXLIF file format that then gets parsed by the parser. And in doing so, we had to convert that file from XML, from this SDLXLIF file format, to JSON, which is where the composite design pattern comes in. JSON allows us to easily create our own objects, and we decided to create objects that could be housed within other objects, just like composite would allow us to do. On top of the parser would lay the UI, essentially, which allows for project and file management, going back and forth between users, project managers, translated files, and this, that, the other. The previous team initially had it so that every time you reloaded the page, it would reparse the file. And we felt that that was a little much. So we refactored the file addition process to utilize the database so that it would better account for larger files that only needed to get uploaded once to the system and reviewed by translators and clients. Because we decided to use Django and React, we went with what Django is known for is the MTV architecture, which allows us to easily take data from a file, parse it quickly using Python, relatively, and display it to a screen using React. The design trade-offs are, of course, we decided to use React, so we had to change all the files to JSON, as opposed to maybe using something like an XML and XSLT translator, something that was maybe already pre-built, maybe something that could be run faster, potentially. But the reason for using JSON is to allow for the use of React, to make the front end much easier to work with and allowing the front end to run more smoothly. The front end and the back end, however, because of the nature of the parser, are not entirely decoupled. Any change that happens to the parser in the way that it parses the files and any change that happens to the JSON object that it eventually spits out needs to be accounted for within the front end. So what we initially thought was going to be entirely a back-end component, the parser, ended up being both a back-end restructuring of converting XML to JSON to also a front-end portion of reading the JSON and displaying that on screen as HTML using React. Those were two of our design trade-offs. Those were the biggest two of our design trade-offs. The Django version, we realized that the version of Django that we were using didn't support file blobs when adding it to Django database. So we had to change the idea of using a data blob and instead saving the file, a JSON file on disk, which can cause potentially a few issues if you are not careful with the size of the JSON that you're saving on disk or the uploaded file system that you're uploading. If they get too large or there's too many of them and they don't get routinely shifted, that can cause, security issues. But we took that into consideration when building out our design.
So our technology stack, as you all mentioned, consists of Python, React, Django, and SQLite. Python was great since it allowed us for great performance in the parsing module, and then React was great as well since it allowed us for dynamic rendering of both the original and translated files so the user can toggle between the two, as well as displaying the custom format applied by the user. Django was great because it provided us with great APIs that were consumed by React, and SQLite was very applicable because a lot of the tables that we had in the database had a lot of relationships, so a relational database made sense in this case.
Yeah, so here's a little bit about our architecture. The main core of it is up in the top right corner for you, the parser module. This is where you get to see a lot of our design choices. We've got a strategy pattern implemented. This strategy has to do with whether certain content should be or should not be translated. So in the SDLXLIF files, you'll have certain bits of content that shouldn't be changed at all. And these also shouldn't be edited by the reviewers. And we needed to have that translated, I guess, to the front end to disallow any of the reviewers to edit that. On the other hand, you've got your traditional content, which is allowed to be edited, and frankly should be edited if there's something wrong with it. With the, you can't see it here, but with the JSON objects, we did have a composite pattern. The text was kind of the leaves to the rest of the objects. You can have several different tags that are accounted for when parsing through this. So those tags really can also self-contain other tags, and that's where the composite pattern really fit in well. With the projects module, there's not too much to say here. You can have a project-wide format or styling that should be applied to all the files within it, or you can have file-specific styling and formats. The user module is fairly robust. We have a fully customizable roles and permissions system, so you can create a new role with fully customized permissions, add them to a project. That was actually something the previous team implemented a large amount of, and we were really impressed with it. And as you can see up in the actually, I lied. In the far right upper corner, you can see kind of the overall system architecture. So this is where we have the API module, all the views that are served up from the Django backend, and how they tie into the presentation layer.
So, as was previously stated, we are the second team working on this project, so we do have a little bit of stuff to work off of. We had a nice prototype site, a login page, home page, user profile page. For super users, a user management page where they could give users roles, see who's logged in the system, and also had a project creation page where users could create projects, add translated files to them, and go from there. And they also had a basic parser. It could take a translated file and parse the text out of it. It couldn't get you those nice bold tags, non-translated text, maybe images embedded into the file itself, but it got you text, so it was nice enough. There was a small amount of technical debt. Some of the modules were highly connected together and made adding new functions a little difficult, but over the past year we were able to work through that, and we were able to get a fair amount of progress done on this project. So our results. In the end, we have to tear down their whole basic parser and implement a whole new parser algorithm. Now we can get text, images, all the good XML tags like bold tags out from it, and into the front end, where we made a page for viewing all of that parse goodies into translated files. So now you can look onto one of the web pages and you can go through a translated file, you can edit any of the translations you want, you can go back and look through the source file, see what the original language was for each sentence. We also optimized parse performance of larger files, 30,000 plus lines. I think our largest file ever was maybe 150,000 lines, and that took about 10 seconds to parse through totally. And we fixed bugs and mitigated vulnerabilities from the previous team. Certain bugs like certain pages of buttons wouldn't work, you couldn't back out from certain pages, and one kind of big security vulnerability where you could log into a page with super user privileges, but that was all fixed up.
So a couple of our challenges here were we had some of those previously mentioned restrictions from the Django version. We wanted to use the data blob field for Django and to store the JSON within for the file. That didn't work out, so like Jarrell said, we saved it to a file on disk and then referenced it within a text field in that table. Another big challenge was domain knowledge. Learning SDLXLIF was pretty tough. It doesn't have many standards. Like I said, every time we'd get a new test file with a new test case, it would break everything, and we'd have to restructure our JSON schema, translate that up to the front end, how it's going to parse out our JSON, and rework a lot of different things. But we eventually, I think, became pretty proficient at it, and it was soon when the front end would tell us there was a bug, we'd be able to look at it and within 20 minutes have a fix. So that was a good feeling. Additionally, the file formats, like we said, parsing the file formats was a pretty big challenge. On the back end, we used a lot of recursive functions that also had cascading parameters. So when we're parsing those non-translatable bits, those are nested within a bunch of different structures. And everything with it, once you hit a non-translatable flag, that has to carry through to everything underneath it, all the child nodes. So we came up with a pretty clever way of dealing with that on the back end. On the front end, it was slightly more difficult. We were working with nested for loops for a little bit until we found a better fix for that. But we managed to overcome a lot of these challenges, and I think we did so with a fair amount of grace.
Yeah, so this is what we've been working with. This is like the basic structure. Here we can see the exact same translate unit converted from the SDLX XML to our JSON object. As you can see at the very, very top, it says tag ID 60, and it gives you a little structure tag with some HTML escaped characters and a /table with a /myfile. I would like to be very clear that this is the hello world of SDLXLIF. It is by no means comprehensive. It can get much more complicated than this. Yeah. So each one of those tag IDs gets converted into, if you look a little bit further down, the source, that XID. Every single, in XML, every single one of the tags that you see gets converted into one of these XIDs. And those XIDs are not 100% super clear, that those need to get translated to what would eventually be our HTML objects, right? Those XIDs can also have contained within them any information that you would put into a regular XML tag. So any style, bold, any attributes that you may want to add into there, that would be contained inside of that XID. And that just references the tags up above. When you move a little bit further down, you get into the trans unit, which are essentially, if you look over to the JSON, where the second children starts, that first sentence type object, and you see a source children and a target children object. That was us putting together what you can see here. Zeg source corresponds to source child, and target corresponds to target children. And this is like level 1. We had to go all the way to level 15, I want to say. So this gets pretty complex.
Yep, go to the demo. We have a quick demo. All right. So as you can see here, we have a nice little login page. You can log in. You can change your password if you forgot it, like I do all the time. And you can also make a new account if you're new to the system. So we'll log right in. Takes you to the home page. Load up where you can see all your projects. But we log in as super user, so we can see all the users in the system. We can see their roles and stuff like that. And we can even make a new user. In this case, we input their email, and we decide what role they want. I'll pick some random email that doesn't exist. And we'll send it out. We have to use the system. In this case, it was sent out an email, and they can use it to join the system from there. And we can also see roles as super user and even make new roles. Let's make a quick one, like guest, which doesn't have a lot of permissions. We'll just click that and that one. As you can see, there's a lot to choose from. And we'll click the role. And let's see if we actually made it. And we can actually go through this list and see like each role we've ever made and all the roles associated with that. All right, back to the projects page. Let's make a new project. We have a Japanese file for you guys today, so we'll call it Japanese 101. All right. So there's no file currently in it, so let's add a new one real quick to upload. So we create the file, we upload it, give it a name, and we choose from this long list of languages to choose from. In this case, the source language is English, but it's kind of hard to find through all these. And there it is. Alternatively, if you don't want to search for it at all, you can just click on it, type in a few letters, and boom, pick the language you want. And select file to add. And there we go. We have the file. We're a little short on time, so I'm just going to skip ahead to the actual file itself. So this is what the parse file looks like. Here we can see the translated view in Japanese, the original view in English. Now we're going to click on a sentence and make a suggestion. So I'm displaying my proficiency in Japanese. So you can see that the sentence is underlined because it has a suggestion and it's pending while it's in orange. Now we're going to make another suggestion and we're going to reject the first one. So after being rejected, the sentence goes back to normal. But if we approve the second one, you can see the contents actually displayed and underlined in green. Now we're going to show you the side-by-side format where translators and reviewers can actually see the source and target language within a single row, making the process much easier. Okay. So that's all we have for you today. Any questions? Yep.
In your design trade-offs, you mentioned that you had chosen the option to do the writing the files to the disk. You'd chosen the option to use the switch from XML or whatever it may have been to JSON. And you mentioned like the time cost of that, but you didn't provide a counterpoint as to why you did it. Like, what was the benefit of it?
The benefit was, in the case of not doing it from XML, the benefit was we get to use React. We get more dynamic front end as opposed to using XSLT, where we would have all the data there, but we wouldn't be able to make it as pretty or as dynamic as we wanted to. So it is a little slower, but we'll have a more nicer front end. And since we're upgrading a site from 2006, we felt that might be a little more important over, let's say, 5 more seconds.
And to the saving the file to disk, our Django version wasn't up to date to the most recent, so we couldn't use something like JSON blob to save it directly to the database as a binary object. We had to find some other way to solve that issue.
And we didn't upgrade to the latest Django version because if we upgrade to the latest version, a lot of stuff that the old team did would become deprecated, and we felt that deprecating and refixing all their stuff wasn't the point of this year's project. It was making forward progress and more features than what they accomplished. Yes, you have a question?
So I noticed that you said you had to use SQLite. Did you consider a different database, or was it sort of just because you're told to make more progress?
We kind of made the decision just to stick with the original team's tech stack. We didn't really want to change too much of what they'd done, even though we changed a lot of what they'd done. So we kind of felt like we wanted to work with what we were given at that point, and we kept the tech stack on for largely that reason. We hadn't really considered any other database technologies.
We were informed by the sponsor that the biggest part was the parser, and to focus most of our time and efforts on understanding SDLX to finish that entirely. And so we didn't really pay attention to, we could use 7,000 other things to make this better, right?
During our reflection, actually, we had a lot of consideration where we went, that would have been a much nicer tech to deal with this problem. So it was, yeah.
Wait, oops, sorry, there's a question being asked.
So, in general, what things went badly for you? What were your challenges?
I'd say one of the biggest challenges was just getting familiar with the SDLX file format. It was probably what kept us in the loop for most of the year, really.
It probably caused our biggest design hiccup as well, because I think back in November, we had a pretty good grasp on what we wanted with SDLX, good design. And then we learned this fundamental part of SDLX from the sponsor, and we had to rework the design in November. So that was a minor setback to design.
I think another challenge that we didn't actually talk about in the slides either was trying to understand the limitations of the previous team's parser strategy. They had only had one team member work on it, and that was a lot of pressure to put on him. There was a lot of pair programming in our team to deal with it,
So a lot of his work was pretty difficult to decipher, and that took up a lot of time in the first semester as well.
Let's thank the team.